You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimpson.
Arkansas lost the battle for the boot 27-24 as LSU won. But if you like what you're hearing on today's episode, please follow my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at All Hog Sports Pod, and please leave a 5-star review as well. But starting it off with the officiating, Mark Curls might be one of the worst SEC officials of all time. I don't know many refs' names, but Mark Curls is one that I have to remember after the 2009 game against Florida and then this game. The targeting call on Jalen Catalon was so bad. There is no excuse for how that is targeting in the NCAA rulebook, or even if you want to pull a SEC card. That is not targeting at all, and he called it, went to the replay booth, and let that be upheld. It just makes no sense, and I obviously can't share video on the podcast, so go look that up, and you'll see exactly what I'm telling you guys. But Arkansas had a clear recovery on an earlier fumble, too. There's no way that the video evidence said that there's no clear recovery of the football as Arkansas had it. It's just ridiculous, and the camera angles even provided that. They had a great angle in the situation, so there's no use for there's not enough evidence to overturn the call on the field. Yes, there was. 7 replay reviews in the game. That is ridiculous. A game should not have that many replay reviews. He also called the game against Texas A&M earlier. Now, he lost that game. It had nothing to do with officiating, but there was, I think, 5 or 6 replay reviews. It just seems Mark Curls and his crew don't know how to officiate properly, so they just go to Birmingham and talk to the guys over there, and I guess they just don't like Arkansas or something. I don't understand it, but the amount of replay reviews that his crew has to have is ridiculous. The SEC needs to suspend Mark Curls from officiating Arkansas football games after what he did this game with the horrible calls and 2009. There's no reason that he should be officiating SEC football, and in particular, Arkansas football. Mark Curls should not be an official in the Southeastern Conference, especially for any Razorback game, and nobody's going to be able to argue that against me. The crew was bad too. There was guys who were calling things that were nowhere near. There's guys who are calling the targeting penalty who are on the other side of the field, the line judge. How? That makes no sense. And then he throws the flag after the guy lays down on the field like he's got hit by a Mack truck. And then as soon as the flag's down, he gets up like nothing happened. It's just absolutely ridiculous. The SEC is just going to suspend him for 1 week and move on. The issue with SEC officiating is transparency and consistency. They're not transparent with their callings because if you criticize them, they're just going to fine you. Look what they did to Lane Kiffin. And they're not consistent. You look at the calls that they give Auburn and Alabama, all these good teams, but when it comes to Arkansas, Arkansas's not a statistically good team. We can't give them the calls. Absolutely ridiculous from SEC officiating. However, that is not an excuse for a loss. The Razorback offense, though, I think was the key point in this game that led us to the loss. 0 for 10 on third downs. 0 for 10. You don't win football games going 0 for 10 on third downs. Nothing was working on third downs. And it just seems like when we run the ball, there's so much movement before the line of scrimmage. We always see guys, moving across the field, or whoever's running the ball, just trying to looking up the field before they get to the line of scrimmage, and then we get like 2 yards to carry. And the running game just wasn't working for us at all. It just doesn't make sense why we go so fast-paced as well. 18 minutes and 17 seconds of offense was on the field. This was a defense that was depleted because of COVID. I'll get to that earlier. But no reason to have your offense on the field for that little amount of time. Felipe Franks is such a great quarterback. On plays where the ball was thrown 20 or plus yards, he had 245 out of 339 yards, perfect QBR with 5 out of 5 completions, 1 touchdown. Why don't we throw the ball deep more? LSU's known to have a horrible secondary, especially down the field. And we just kept running the same plays. Let's move this guy in motion, have Franks run. It just doesn't make sense. And we need to ditch the scrambles and draws. It's just not working out for us. 14 carries for 43 yards now. He had 1 or 2 carries where it worked out, but I feel like the majority of the time it would be like 3rd and 5, and he would go on a QB run after we fake Burks and Smith, who run to the right. It just doesn't make sense at all. That just needs to be eradicated from the playbook if it's not going to work out for the Razorbacks. And the offensive line didn't help at all, as we were missing 2 starters. Now that can explain why running was pretty bad. No Boyd because of COVID-19 protocol, so that hurts us a little bit. But I thought Smith was the better running back. However, he didn't do too good. 11 carries for 28 yards. Like I said, run north and south. That's the thing with these Razorback running backs, is they kind of look for the holes in the pocket more. And they just need to get down the field, get the yards, and it just didn't happen. And it doesn't help that the offensive line was not doing too good at all. However, Traylon Smith and Rakeem Boyd are very talented running backs, and I would expect them to make massive, adjustments and things during practice looking ahead at the Mizzou game. However, Mike Woods is such a great deep ball threat for this Razorback team. In my opinion, he's one of the better deep ball threats in the SEC. Arguably could make a case for him being the best, though. He had 4 receptions for 140 yards. Great game from him. I feel like whenever he gets down the field and has a 50-50 ball with a cornerback, he's always the guy to win it, and it's just really impressive from him. And I would expect him to continue to get those deep balls from Felipe Franks. But Burks, too, is a great deep threat, but he's better inside of slant routes and things like that, which we need to use him more on 3rd down because we were over 10 on 3rd down in this matchup. Burks has 5 receptions for 90 yards on this game. And TJ Hammonds, he was a really good recruit out of high school. He never really did much under Balema or Chad, but he had a really good game. We've obviously been trying double reverses and things like that to utilize his athleticism all season, and it hasn't been working. But he finally had a really good game. He had 1 catch for 51 yards down the field, and he actually transitioned to wide receiver for the season, but he went back to running back because we only had 1 scholarship running back for this game. But he had a 24-yard rush into the goal line drive, and then that resulted in a field goal because the rain started pouring. And that was the worst timing rain I've ever seen in my life. Arkansas was running down the field, about to score a touchdown, go up by even more, and boom. Here comes this rainstorm out of nowhere, and I put the poncho on, I was at the game, and it was bad, so the Razorbacks' whole tempo, whole offense was just messed up there, so we had to settle for a field goal, and as a result, we arguably could have lost that game, because if we would have got the touchdown, would have made it, but can't control the weather sometimes. Defense, though, did its duty, but struggled a little bit. On the defensive line front, there was at least 5 defensive linemen who accounted for 69% of snaps. That includes Gerald's, Coates, Nicholas, Gregory, and Kelly, who were all out for this game, and Arkansas was dealing with some COVID-19 issues before this, as Boyd was also out. So the game against Mizzou has been postponed. That is just in a couple minutes ago as I'm recording this. So Arkansas dealing with some COVID-19 issues, didn't have these guys, and it was a little hard to create pressure, but one guy I feel like Razorback fans will not talk about enough is Jonathan Marshall. He's a beast. He was fighting that whole entire game, and I saw him after the game, and he looked so tired over on the sideline. That whole defensive front, and obviously being out there for 42 minutes in terms of time of possession, didn't help these guys at all. However, Jonathan Marshall is a beast in the trenches, 4 total tackles with 1 tackle for loss. And I feel like a guy who Razorback fans don't really appreciate is Marshall, but just because of how good he's been all season, and then he steps up big time in a game, even though they really weren't able to create a ton of pressure on the true freshman TJ Finley, who had a pretty good game against the Razorbacks. However, Miles Fletcher created a fumble, and the true freshman safety has been really good for the Razorbacks. He was one of the best recruits out of the 2020 class, and I would expect him to keep making an impact, especially when we have guys like Blair, who wasn't in this game, probably due to COVID-19 as well. For Miles Fletcher to get involved in this defense at a young time is really good for the Razorbacks, and he's going to be a star within the next few years, in my opinion. He's showed a lot of ability to go straight for the ball in certain key situations. First turnovers, like he got a turnover against Georgia, got a turnover here. Really good athleticism and going to the ball from Slusher. And I'd expect him to get a bigger role as Jalen Catalan was ejected on a horrible targeting call, which just destroyed all defensive momentum for the Razorbacks. I can't stress that enough. The SEC absolutely screwed us there. However, when Jalen Catalan sits, whether that be against Mizzou, Bama, we don't know yet with the schedule. I'll keep you updated on this podcast. But whatever happens with him, Slusher will probably play more in that first half. But Grant Morgan and Bumper Pool are continuing to be a beast all over the field. I feel like they're two guys that we're going to rely on every game to get 10-plus tackles if the defense is on the field as much as it was. Those guys are just everywhere making plays for the Razorbacks and just really athletic guys, considering Morgan doesn't even have an arm. And I sit on this talk about on this podcast forever about how he's still hurt. But I really can't complain here. A super depleted team did the best of their ability, obviously on the field for 42 minutes without 5 or 6 defensive linemen. It's tough. So they did their job here, and well, it may not have been the outcome that I wanted. I think anything, the offense has to be blamed in this as, 0 for 10 on third downs, 18 minutes of total offense. And just the inability to change momentum is super frustrating because I feel like some of the play calls were fine. The play calling wasn't atrocious. Execution, though, of the fast-tempo offense just wasn't working out. Defense was getting depleted, and the offense was going out there and having 2-minute touchdown drives. It just struggled for the Razorbacks as LSU just continued to run the ball against the depleted defensive line front due to COVID-19. But the special teams woes continued for the Razorbacks. Arkansas got down the field and was lined up to kick a game-winning field goal from 45 yards to move to overtime, but LSU blocked it. And if you look at the lineup on this play, LSU had 7 defensive players on one side of the lineup and 3 to 4 on the other, and we didn't adjust. We should have called a timeout there and adjusted properly, but I think there was some understanding that LSU was going to try to ice the kicker probably and call a timeout, and we'd be able to readjust. That's just my assumption from why there wasn't a timeout there. I don't understand why we saw so many LSU players on that side, and then we just continued to sit there in the same formation. It didn't really make a ton of sense. I'm not sure how the rules affect that because I know there's a ton of rules for that. It could have been a rules issue. I'm not sure. But special teams is just so bad on field goals. We've had a ton of kicks where they've been blocked for extra points or lined up, and it's gone left or right. It's just not been consistent for the Razorbacks at all. But punting has finally figured out. Reed Bauer is a beast of a punter, and I'm really looking forward to what he can do the rest of the season, as I feel like each game he improves so much better. But the special teams unit has to improve. We lost a timeout on special teams because of 10 players on the field. And there's just so much miscommunication and misguidance and not calling timeouts and things like that that have to improve if you want to be an SEC caliber football team.
Now, for the grades of the Arkansas Razorbacks.
I give the offense a D in this matchup. I think there's a couple big plays that got us to a point where I can give us a couple points, but 0 for 10 on third downs, 18 minutes of possession is just a line where I take so many points off because you cannot be doing that in the SEC, especially with a depleted defense. That's just where I see the offense struggled a ton, and that's the reason why I gave him such a low grade. Defense, I'll give a B, though. I think they did the best job they could. Obviously, losing a ton of guys to COVID didn't help much, and then also having so many guys out because of injuries and things like that all season long, because obviously we weren't able to get in the locker room, get much practice, things like that didn't help at all. Give the defense a B, though. I thought they played a pretty good game. Special teams, I'll give a D+, and I'm sure I could give kicking like an F, but punting was honestly like an A-A, and I know punting is a different situation than kicking, and you don't need it as much. However, because of how good the punt was, I'll give an F, but overall, I'm going to give the overall team a D+. I thought this performance might have been one of the worst offensively for the Razorbacks all season, a game that was very winnable in a rivalry situation, and then it's just so weird how special teams has been bad, and then it cost us this game. It's just unfortunate for the Razorbacks. But some changes to the schedule as basketball season is on its way. Mizzou, Arkansas has been postponed due to COVID issues. So on Wednesday, Mississippi State Valley State preview will be up. Arkansas will be playing them in basketball Wednesday night. Thursday will be basketball and winter sports preview. Friday will be the Mississippi State Valley State recap. And then the North Texas preview for basketball. I'm really excited for basketball season, and you can listen to those and how I'll be previewing those. But so many transfers and new freshmen are coming into this program. Desi Sills coming back for the Razorbacks. Should be a really good team this year, in my opinion. The roster is stacked, but I'll get more into that in tomorrow's episode, so stay tuned for that one. You can find all ways to listen in all social medias at allhogsports.com. And as always, Whoop pig. Let's go get those Tigers whenever we get to play them.
That's all for today's episode of All Hog Sports with Sam Stimpson. Make sure to stay tuned.